Hello, Tungsten Miner here. As you can see, I am in a vanilla Minecraft village. Not entirely vanilla. This is an immersive engineering cottage, and there ought to be an engineer around here someplace. But that's not what I came here to talk about. I've started making roads. Now, you've seen one of the little bitty pieces of roads that went up to that canal, but now I've extended that road quite a long ways. So let's take a little tour here, kind of see how this goes. In prior videos, I've talked about how I go about making these roads, and I thought I might do a little bit of that at the end of the video if we get to a spot that needs a little bit of an extension. So here's a break. This you might remember from prior videos is a Rogue Dungeons dungeon in a hot climate, and then up here. Alright, so from here, the road just continues up the hill to the house, and that's the part that I've already shown previously. So let's go back the other way. Get back to our branch here. So at this point, I had to go over this kind of big cave system. So what I wound up doing is filling in a lot of dirt blocks underneath to make something that looks pretty convincingly like it was here the whole time. Not too highly manufactured. And then just carried the road across. Under other circumstances, I might have actually built a bridge or something like that. So here, the road intersected with this hillside. And what I decided I was going to do is make it so that... no dirt. Make it so that I'd carve up the natural terrain to assume that dirt blocks need to have a slope of 1 to 1, but clay needs to have a slope of 2 to 1, so it can go up higher. And then stone, I was going to do the same 2 to 1. So here we've seen I've carved back the hillside in such a way as it looks fairly natural. And it looks like the stone does protrude, as you would expect. It's a harder substance, so it wouldn't get worn down so quickly. And I didn't go carve up the whole rest of the hillside. I left most of it alone as its natural kind of surface. But this did require digging out some of the clay and some of the dirt in order to make that surface. And as you can see, the grass hasn't entirely grown back in yet from my construction project. Then we take a turn, come up this way. And here we arrive at one of the other players' homes. And the road actually just kind of goes sneaking right through his space. And then into a jungle, into a forest, cutting straight across. And of course, as I was going through here, I'm using my Lumberaxe pretty heavily in order to chop down the trees. I'm using my excavator to carve the pathway itself. In rare cases, I use my hammer to do the same thing for stone. Mostly I try to stay away from digging deeply in. I try to follow the terrain as carefully as I can. So here we arrive at another village. And what I did here was I extended the natural village road out to just past the current structures that the villager kind of came with. And then as you can see here, there's a bunch of terrain that I've flattened out, and finally the grass has started to grow back in again. So I can just come and right click, and with even an excavator I can turn that back into roads. And of course this is a feature that was added, I think, in Minecraft 1.9 was the roads. And you get that by just right-clicking grass with a shovel. So waiting for these little chunks to grow back in, but now I've kind of restored the appearance of the road. This was actually at this level up here, so you kind of like bumped your head against the eave and you couldn't get in the door. It was just kind of strange how villages spawn sometimes. So getting back on my horse, we go up here and carry on. And the road is going to cut straight across the countryside a little bit further. until we get to the shore. Now you can see over here, one of the other players on the server has built a temporary bridge, and obviously very temporary, just trying to get across to that other part of the island there. So one of the things I will be doing in the not too distant future, hopefully, is to help them build a proper bridge, starting from the end of this roadway, now that we have it, and just kind of picking up and going across to that island over there. So we'll have a nice long bridge. Probably, I'm thinking, maybe a stone bridge with some arches. That'd be kind of fun. But we'll see. Haven't really decided yet. Okay, so as you can see, I've left this waypoint on. That's the spawn point for this server. So one thing I was thinking to do here is to extend the roadway over to that spawn point so that any newcomers to the server are able to get over there. And what I was going to do is to pick a place up here somewhere and then bring the road over that way. And looking here, trying to scope things out, I can see I've got a bit of a hole there. So maybe I want to start over here, kind of work my way up the hill. That would intersect pretty well over here. So yeah, I think that's what I'll do. So when I choose a roadway, I will generally pull up my map here, zoom in a little bit, and try to figure out, like, where is it going to go over this whole course. So here this goes straight across. I run into some sort of cave here, but that's all right. And that gets me up to about here. And then I can make a little curve into the road and bring it back down to this swamp area here, so that the spawn point then will be right at the end of a road, and new players can start following from that point. So let me get my excavator. Probably should get rid of some of these bits to make some room. So now I'm gonna pick my spot here, and the first thing I usually do is to just carve the road out. And as I'm going along, I try to stay along with the terrain. In some cases like this, where there's a tiny gap, I'll fill it in. But generally, if the road has any blocks next to it that are lower. So here, where I've got a choice, right? There's a piece that's a little higher, there's a piece that's a little lower. I'll default to going with the lower altitude for the road, and then carve off the extra blocks. So here, my next little piece, that's one lower. I'm going to keep going that way. And now here, where there's one block on this side that covers it, I can now jump up and make the road take a step up here. So as I'm building the roads, I always want to see one block on both sides. And now I've got this little section here that's higher on one side than the other. So I'm just going to take my regular shovel and carve that back a bit. And as I was saying before, I like to have a one-to-one path with grass, because that gives you this nice pattern with Optifine turned on, that it looks like it's just smooth grass all the way up. You're not changing textures. Get rid of some of this. And carry on. Now here's a little tiny gap, and this is just the edge of that. And now I don't have that side anymore, so I want to dig this one layer deeper. It's a little bit of a back and forth sort of process of looking at what fits with the terrain, and you know, this kind of comes right around, and it makes sense that this doesn't get carved off. Now I'm getting to a spot where it's getting pretty high pretty quickly, so I may be obliged to put in some stairs or something to prevent things getting too messed up. Right, looks like it's getting dark again. Just a moment. Okay, carrying on. Now, being that I'm getting into a forested area, it's a pretty good chance that I'm going to need to do some cutting down of trees once I get further in here. But I'm Doing pretty well so far about not needing to do that. Oh, see, that was a mistake. So I've got one on that side. I have one on the other side, but I can just knock that off. Okay, so clearly this tree is not in a sensible location and is not going to work. I'm going to grab my Lumberaxe, knock that down. Now this tree here is overhanging the road a bit, so in this case I'm just going to clear those leaves. This tree here, looks like it's just kind of in the way. Let's knock that back. Now as I get done with this, I'm finding that I'm knocking down a lot of trees, and if things are starting to look too open, then I will then I'll go back and plant some trees and try to make it look reasonable again. So just moving all this back. Now here, there's this part which is now too steep. So sometimes I have to go multiple levels back. So I could carry on with this for quite a while, and ultimately I probably will do that. But for now, let's just finish up this little road making demonstration by saying I'm going to grab some reinforced dirt. So that's going to match the pattern of the rest of my road here. And now I'm going to go to the end of what I've dug out so far and fill that in. And this is important for two reasons. One, it's kind of weird to just leave a trench, and that doesn't look very nice. Two, I could fill it in with some other material, like, say, cobblestone, but roads are long, and you need a lot of material. So even if you've got a lot of cobblestone from some digging you've been doing somewhere else, chances are you're going to run out pretty darn fast. I could fill it in using chisels and bits and put in a half of a step of cobblestone, or even a quarter or less. But then you've got to deal with all the chisels and bit stuff and having a chisel and putting down the pieces, and that can take a bit longer. It's often more time-consuming to put those down properly oriented and so on. So the thing I generally will do for these long-distance roads is just take the same dirt that I've been carving up and change the pattern of it so that it doesn't transform back into grass, and then just lay it out as I've done here. Carve that one back. And so now the last little bit here is that since this is an intersection, I try to avoid having these sharp corners. So I take my dirt and I just carve off one road width of corner to add in there. So 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, and then the middle. There we go. That way I've got a nice neat intersection that's heading off towards the spawn point. And looking at my map, we can see I've gotten, I don't know, a third of the way there, maybe a little bit more. And I'll just keep going up the hill here when I'm done with the video, and then carve it back around to reach the spawn point. So that is a little tutorial on making roads, or at least the style of roads that I make. As you can see, they go pretty fast, and they don't require a lot of materials. It's just kind of straightening things out. And a lot of the value of it, honestly, isn't so much the appearance, but rather smoothing out the terrain so that with a horse, for example, you never have to jump. You're just always stepping up from one to the next, to the next, to the next. And sometimes if you've got the auto jump turned on in your game, or if you've got some kind of magic boots or whatever that allow you to do that, you can then move along really darn quickly on these roads. And of course the other benefit is that it's a lot harder to get lost if you're following a road, as you kind of always know where you are. So I think that's it for this time. If you like the video, hit like. If you want to see what comes up next, hit subscribe, and I will talk to you later.